Welcome back to the second and last day of the third Mekong Regional Land Forum. If you're joining us for the first time today, well, then of course, a very warm welcome. My name is Dana Wen, and I'm your host for the day. Now, yesterday, we looked at customary and collective forest tenure in the Mekong region. Speakers shared their experiences and approaches at regional, country, and local levels, highlighted the trends and opportunities, and discussed ways to leverage existing platforms to increase forest tenure security. We also spoke about customary tenure and how important it is for the livelihoods of over 70 million people in the Mekong region, especially indigenous people and ethnic communities who are dependent on forest resources. Now, we noted that we've come a long way in terms of increasing tenure security, but the legal frameworks are incomplete or unclear, and the implementation pretty uneven. There are a lot of challenges, but also opportunities. Now, what is really key is that local farmers and communities have the capacity to generate sustainable economic benefits from the forest, and often the policies are not conducive for them. So today we will explore the role played by private companies investing in forest areas and what are the conditions for a positive and beneficial relationship with the communities that they need to interact with. But before we begin our first session, let me reiterate some of the housekeeping rules. First, please mute your mics unless you are speaking. Second, all of the event details, including the Zoom links to all the different sessions, are on Whoever. So please do keep the app handy on your mobile phone or on your desktop. Now, all the main sessions are in English, but simultaneous translation is provided in 4 languages: Khmer, Lao, Myanmar, and Vietnamese. So if you need to follow the proceedings in a language other than English, please make sure that you have selected the correct audio channel on Zoom. Now, to do this, what you have to do is go to the bottom of your Zoom window where you will see the icons for audio, video, as well as the chat box, and then look for the icon of a globe. You need to click on it and then select the language that you want. But you also need to make sure that you turn off the original presenter language, or otherwise you're going to be hearing both voices in your ears. We have tested it this morning and it seems to work, so fingers crossed. Now, again, we have more than 150 participants and counting today, which is great. And we want to make sure that each of you can contribute to the discussions. So if you have a question during the plenary sessions, please use the chat box. The moderator will then select and read out during the Q&A sessions. Please do identify yourself and your organization when you're asking questions, and please keep them succinct and to the point so that we can hear from as many of you as possible. Similarly, in the breakout sessions, please follow the guidance of the moderators, and the same rules on keeping the questions short and concise applies. Now that we've gotten all of the admin out of the way, it is my pleasure to welcome Graham Dixie, Executive Director of Grow Asia, who will be setting the scene for what we have in store today. Now, Grow Asia is a multi-stakeholder partnership platform that works on inclusive agricultural development in Southeast Asia. And Graham himself has more than a decade of experience on responsible agricultural investment issues. Graham?
Thank you very much, and a warm welcome. It's wonderful to see the numbers of participants on the bottom of the page going up with every moment. So my job is simple, really. It is that I've been asked to be able to present a little bit of a narrative, to be able to sketch out for us all, how do we get to where we are now? And so that I'll take us through the story of responsible investing quickly over the last 12 years. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Just very, very briefly, so you get a picture of Grow Asia. the basic idea of Grow Asia is this, that if you can get the public sector, the private sector, and the producers to form a partnership and to discuss things, the balance of probabilities is they can make smarter and better and more holistic decisions. And we can see this with other countries around the world. And where we operate in is Myanmar, in Cambodia, in Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, and Papua New Guinea. We've got about 580 partners, half of them are the private sector, about 20% are the government agencies, and about 30% farmer organizations. And they form working groups, they do projects, they look at different issues, and we have something like 2 million farmers reached and over 1 million actively engaged in projects at the moment. So that's just a little bit of an idea of what we do. If we go on to the next slide, we'll get into the meat of the conversation. So in 2008, 2009, everything changed. Traditionally, food, like computer prices, fell in real terms. But in 2008, 2008, all that changed. Food prices went up, exports started dropping, farm profits shot up, stock markets crashed. It was a worrying time, and it had consequences. If you were a food importing nation, you suddenly, go back one slide, you suddenly got really worried about your own food security. And they started thinking about, should we be making foreign direct investments in farming to secure food for our country, whether that's Japan or Oman? If you happen to be a billionaire, your financial advisor will probably say the stock market is crashing, but anything that's linked to food and agriculture is holding up, and farming profits are going up. You should put a portion of your funds into agricultural funds. So there was a number of new agricultural funds came out. And then there was the cry of land grab and the very important issue around how was the voice of farmers getting into this dialogue about what was going on. Next slide, please. The immediate reaction was interesting. And what happened was that some civil societies commissioned studies focusing on bad examples to be able to indicate that actually foreign direct investment, larger scale farming operations were evil, were bad, were misusing land, were pushing people off. And then the private sector did the reverse, which was to go to the other end of the bell graph and point out the ones which were very good and imply that all of the private sector investments were good. But the real worry here was that the consequences was we didn't know what worked and what wasn't. Was larger scale farming a good or bad thing? But much more importantly, what did you need to put in place to make a larger scale agribusiness investment work? Next slide, please. So it was a very interesting group called the Interagency Working Group. And this was FAO, IFAD, UNCTAD, and the World Bank. Then did some research as a neutral operator to say, let's try and get some real numbers around that. Let's build up some empirical information about what really worked. And the first one was that they managed to get a development bank to open its books on its 178 agribusiness investments over 50 years to see how they operated. And it told us a lot. It brought into the public domain information we hitherto had not seen. It's risky. Failures happened, but mainly they happened because of poor planning or external influences. It took time for these things to work through, and there were some business models that seemed to work better than others. And peculiarly, although only about 50% of the projects were generating sufficient cash to fulfill their requirements when they started, about 75% did end up as viable businesses. And that was because often the first person who invests in a business project loses money. It's the second or the third owner that actually makes it work. This is not exclusive to agriculture. It also happens, I'm told, in the hotel business. But some business models seem to be proving worked well. There was technology, and every so often one of those investments would may be transformative. So one of their investments, for example, was the opening of smallholder tea farming in tenure, which is now 60 or 70% of all the tea comes from smallholder farmers. The next question was, well, if you applied responsible investment to a project, did it help? But we knew it took about 9 years for this to come through, so it would be pointless to apply that to a new investment. So something interesting was done, which was to retrofit to existing mature agribusiness investments to see how responsible they were, and then to go to the surrounding communities and essentially ask the question, how was it for you? And that showed what we probably all knew, that actually agricultural investing, they are mixed. There's some which are very good, there's some which are very bad, but most of them are a mixture of good and bad. They're complex. And there were certain points which really caused the pain. And that is the pain point is basically land and a little bit about environment. And that another issue that came out was that if an agribusiness started losing money, all pretense of being responsible would go out the window. So profitability was very closely linked to responsibility. The pluses that people talked about were jobs, were access to markets, and access to infrastructure. And in fact, when we mapped that out, for every negative view held by the surrounding community, there were 3 positives. And I think it taught us some interesting things. One was that the most responsible investors were the most experienced. In other words, they knew that going through those steps of consulting, of setting up grievance mechanisms, of building a harmonious relationship with their local community worked, and that it resulted in greater profit and more harmony. So this gave us some good lessons about what were it gave us some sense about what worked and what didn't work, and what we needed to apply. Next, please. So the Committee for Food Security then, which is the CFS in Rome, started to negotiate the guidelines for responsible investing. This is the voices of the private sector, the public sector, the governments and civil society. There was tensions were somewhat reduced because that we now started getting a better sense of that it wasn't necessarily as controversial as people thought it was. And there were 10 principles which were approved in 2009. But when you look at them, you see that actually the negotiation process didn't consider how these were going to be implemented. So, but there are some few basic ingredients that every responsible investing standards will have. But there was a bit of a mixed and messy division between the roles of government and investors. And one thing that didn't really cover was legacy issues. On to the next slide, please. Next slide, please. Oh, good, great. So we, at that time, GrowAsia was here, based in the region, and had a close relationship with the ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian States. And every year, their 10 ministers of agriculture come together and discuss agricultural issues so that they can come together in a consensus about what they wanted to do. And the 10 ministers asked for guidelines to be developed for responsible agricultural investing in Southeast Asia. Now, guidelines are different from principles. They're much more practical. They're much more about how to. And we were requested to help them get those done, and we had them approved in a 12-month period. And we did that in partnership with the International Institute of Sustainable Development, ISD. And then we did this by based on the CFS RAI, but plus the learnings from what we'd learned about the practical deliveries of CFS RAI, but also about the work that had been done working with investors to learn what works and what didn't work. And then that was refined in the light of an ASEAN context through regional consultations with multi-stakeholder partnerships, private sector governments, NGOs, farmer organizations, and these were adopted in 2018. And as were a plan to turn those nice words into something which was practical. And there are 3 elements of that program. One is to align the guidelines by country with their policies. And there is a particular tool that the ASEAN have to be able to measure the change there. So it's using standard ASEAN techniques to be able to get that. The second was to build up expertise and delivery. Consistently, you hear from people that are out there, we're fine about the principles, we need to know the practice. And so the idea was to build, or is to build, a number of experts within the region who can sit down with the investor, with the local authority, with the local community, and basically sing from the same song sheet to make sure that they all have got those 10 principles in place. And this was to embed this into an ASEAN institution. This is likely to be some university to carry out those trainings, to measure the process. And this is a partnership that we're doing with FAO and IISD. And we're very grateful to the land portal, MRLG, and the RAI associations to operate this. And we have got now 3 donors, and they will be supporting us for 3 years with the promise of another 3 years to be able to continue this process. And the measure will be on the increase in quantity and quality of investments. In other words, if there are 400 of these investments a year, what percentage of those are being affected positively by the ASEAN guidelines? Next slide, please. So just sort of stepping back for a moment, what we need is a mixture of sticks and carrots. Mandates of the guidelines will be useful, and particularly things like screening investors, actually being able to work with investors that have got a track record and got experience reduces the likelihood of problems. But it also creates a certain amount of resentment, and there are lots of problems with countries not having the resources to execute it properly. So let's just think about the carrots. So what we are doing in this process is to focus on the positives, on the how to and the how to make it easy to. So the most important thing around the RAI and the guidelines is that it reduces risks and delays. For outgrowers, it helps in due diligence if a person is trying to sell that, and it creates a harmonious relationship with the surrounding communities, and it is the voice of experience. And the second thing is to be able to emphasize with the private sector who say to us, there are hundreds of these different standards out there. We don't need another one. And the point that we've made here is actually mostly if they're already applying some standards, they will be covering a lot of those guidelines. So the effort they need to do to become aligned and to become accredited in those is to take on the ones that they're not so far doing. So this is a way of being able to get across a message that this is a benefit to the private sector. It reduces the likelihood of your cash flow being delayed and making the project unsuccessful. It creates a much better relationship with your surrounding communities. There's studies which show that if you spend 2% of your total capital investment in working with the local communities, getting the responsible bits right, it greatly reduces the risks and the delays that are likely to happen. So the consequence is that we're now building the blocks for the rollout, what works, how to, enabling all of those that will be surrounding the local investment to sing from the same song sheet, that they know that all the pieces are in place, and that what we're trying to do here is across the region is to very much align with what Sustainable Development Goal 17, which is we're going to deliver things at scale and in time. These have to be done by loose associations working harmoniously together. And hence the importance of us working with the Land Portal and MRLG and the RAI associations and other people in the region, because if we can work together, we can be able to deliver this program in a much more effective way. So that's the thing. Last slide. And just, they asked me to comment on some things going forward. And I'm really interested today in looking at FPIC and finding out the definitions of what is consent. We have seen projects which have not gone forward because people were confused. Is it unanimous or is it just a simple majority? How do you get a sense which way a community wants to go and what it needs. And on the forestry front, we know that there's some really good practices out there, but how can we get those good practices from the best companies taken up by others? So that's all from me, and I look forward to participating as we continue today. Over.
Thanks so much, Graham, and for that fascinating journey back in time, you know, showing us how we've gotten to where we are. And I could see that already there are a couple of questions in the chat box for you. It's also quite exciting to hear about the ASEAN guidelines, and I'm sure there will be lots more queries on that as well. Before we move on to the next part of the session 3, may I just again request everyone to mute themselves if they're not speaking, because it can be quite disruptive, not just for the speakers, but for the rest of the audience as well. So thank you. Let's now move on to the next part of the forum, which is going to focus on FPIC, or free prior informed consent, a key element, of course, of responsible land investment. But what exactly is it, and how can it support development, avoid conflict, and respect community rights? Well, we have 3 speakers who will demystify the concept of FPIC. First, we have Kim Lai from Oxfam, Cambodia, who's going to be doing the introduction on the rationale and purpose of FPIC.
Thank you, Ten, for your introduction. It is my pleasure to join this forum. And thank you for having me to present the concept and the rationales related to free prior informed consent. And my name is Lai Kim. I'm working as a regional program coordinator for Oxfam extractive industry program in Asia. I'm based in with Oxfam in Cambodia. I consider myself as an FPIC practitioner, giving my background, my working experience over the past 15 years related to social forestry and conservation forestry before I'm holding my current position with Oxfam. My work with the current program of Oxfam related to free prior informed consent is to promote partnerships, to promote FPIC educations and training, to develop projects, intervention to support NGO partners, for them to educate or work with the local communities to promote FPIC rights. In this regard, I'm happy to share with you concept, principles, rationales, and some recommendations related to ethics that have been applied in land use-based sector, which is extractive industry sector. Next slide, please. FPIC is quite important in the Mekong region. Let's look into a broader context which is in Asia. Asia is a home of approximately 260 million indigenous people, making up of 70% of the global indigenous population. The majority of indigenous people reside in Lower Mekong country, whether they officially regard as indigenous people or not, but the fact is there are many ethnic groups in our region. The Lower Mekong countries house one of the world's longest river, which is the Mekong River, that provide livelihoods and food security to about 600 million population. In general, communities or indigenous community in particular have a very distinct relationship with land, as we know, and land territory and resources, because their livelihood basically relies on land, water, and ecosystem. It is good to know that most countries in our region, in the Mekong region, have adopted international conventions and policies related to indigenous people, such as UNDRIP, a convention on biological diversity, ILO convention 169, and so on, and also adopt standards and procedures of international financial institutions, such as IFC or ADB. These policies, these provide a very important policy framework for company, for government, for CSO to follow, to uphold FPIC for the benefit of local communities and for the benefit of sustainable investments of land use-based projects. Next slide, please. So what is FPIC? FPIC contains of 4 keywords. First is free. Free implies free from manipulations, cohesions. Prior implies that activities occur in advance of in order to related to decision making, which allow adequate time for local community to use the traditional decision-making process to have an internal dialogue, discussion, prior consensus or decision-making can be reached among them. Inform implies that activities facilitate information sharing, objective of the project that easily allow community to and stakeholder to understand. And then consent is implies that it allow community to approve or reject any project. The keyword here is consent. Consent, of course, it implies veto rights of the community, while consultations like negotiation is considered as process, when consent is considered as an outcome of the process. In some communities, especially indigenous communities, they use the traditional norm to reach consent. Most of the case, they use consensus bidding process, not a voting process. For Oxfam, we use community engagement spectrum as our guiding to judge whether a project is considered at the stage of information sharing, consultations, or seeking agreements, or applying FPIC. But in general, FPIC is a two-way communication process. Is considered as an ongoing process in a different stage of project implementation. It should be led by the community by themselves and for themselves. There should not be an imposed procedure on them. So this qualifies for the FPIC. Next slide, please. Cause of conflict, in general, conflict has a cost, of course. The longer it happens, more costs will impose to project. Lack of the respect of the rights and the need of local communities can create conflicts. And the cost of conflict in some cases is quite substantial, and thus threaten the project returns of investments or project sustainability. An example, a study by Harvard Kennedy School in 2014 on the cost of community conflict in extractive industry sector found that a world-class mining company stand to lose about $2 million per week. So that is an example. It lose with that amount of values as per the loss of productivity as a result of the production delay from social conflict. So this is an example. So in the case where land use conflicts occur, it's very important to undertake and promote the FPIC process, how agreement could be made between communities and company, whereby land titling, land recognitions, land use conflict resolution could be made. Otherwise, community should be entitled to get compensations or other form of appropriate redress. Next slide, please. However, we see that FPIC is possible based on my experience, and we should not, companies like governments, agencies should not be scared of FPIC. And in fact, FPIC, if you understand the local, process, FPIC is not a complicated process at all. So it's very important to stop seeing community as a hostile to investments and consider them as a part of a stakeholder, and most importantly, consider them as a local beneficiary. So there are many aspects that we can work to promote FPIC, and here I just like to highlight some of the domains that consider as a very minimum requirements or consideration to promote FPIC in any context. Yeah, please next slide. First, it's very important for companies and for governments likewise to make a policy commitment to implement FPIC. It's just a policy intent. Is the first step that need to be demonstrated to the public that company or government commit to apply or commit to implement FPIC. In mining sector, in extractive industry sector, for example, we see that more mining company issue a policy statement which say yes to FPIC. It's a very positive development in the sector I'm working with. If you look into this spectrum community, in fact, community engagement spectrum, we did a study in 2015 on community consent index, where we mapped out about 38 companies, mining companies, and we classify them based on the policy statements following community engagement spectrum, and we found that 14 out of 38 companies, say yes to FPIC. In our region, at least we have 3 companies: Angkor Gold, MMG. Angkor Gold is in Cambodia, MMG and Panos are in Laos. Next slide, please. Second is very important to allow communities enough time to apply process and steps based on the traditional norms or social norm Here are some of the steps that have been defined by indigenous community. And in fact, an example in Cambodia just a month ago, for villages of indigenous community in northern region of Cambodia in Ratanakiri have reached an agreement with a mining company following some of these steps and process. And it's very important that when agreement is reached between communities and company, a mechanism should be set up to monitor the implementation of agreements, so thus accountability could be enhanced post agreement is made. Next slide, please. Recommendation number 3 regarding to the behavior of the local staff of the company, local staff of NGO, or local staff of governments. I mean, the success of the implementations of FPIC depend largely on the behavior and attitudes of the local staff working with local communities. And therefore, having a code of conduct to guide, to set up kind of disciplines and behavioral requirements for local staff is quite important. Here are some of the examples. For example, local staff should avoid using bad languages. Local staff should demonstrate or show respect and make effort to build trust with local communities, and so on, so on. Yeah. So those are some of the recommendations that could enhance the behavior quality of the local staff, but that requires companies like NGOs, like government agency to develop such code of conduct to guide the behavioral quality of field staff. Thank you. Next slide, please.
If I can ask you, Kim Lay, to conclude, because you are getting to the end of the time.
Yeah, that I think one more or two more slides. So the next recommendation is invest more in social development to obtain FPIC is considered as an art in communication, an art in building relationship, art in building trust, and so on. And therefore, take FPIC as a continuous process in the lifetime of a project. Next slide, please. It's also equally important to create policy environment and to create partnership to implement FPIC. And therefore, having a good policy environment that recognized by government and equally committed by company would enhance the conditions required to implement the FPIC. Likewise, NGO can be a part in supporting the process when communities and company agree to undertake negotiation in order to reach FPIC. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Kim Lai, for that very comprehensive introduction on FPIC and the very interesting example from Ratanakiri as well. And I guess, like you said, we just have to wait and see, you know, the enforcement and what are the next steps. Now, our second speaker, Nam Phan from SNV, will be talking about how the FPIC principles that Kim Lai has just spoke of are being applied in Vietnam, in particular on a coffee agroforestry project.
Thank you, Kim Lai, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is my privilege to speak at the third Mekong Regional Land Forum. And my name is Nam from the SNV Vietnam. First of all, I would like to thank so much the German government who providing generous funding to implement this exciting coffee wrap project. Today, I will share with you the journey getting to yes and the role of the FPIC to convince the farmer to transform monocrop coffee to agroforestry model. Also convince the company to work closely with the farmer and only source deforestation-free coffee. We also try to convince the public sector to provide enabling conditions and public finance for sustainable coffee and inclusive value chain, and at the same time strengthening the forest protection and biodiversity conservation. Next slide, please. Can you put the next slide? Yeah, thank you. So the project is implemented by the Netherlands Development Organization, and SNV is an international development organization that make a lasting difference in the lives of people living poverty by helping them raise income and access basic service. We implementing in more than 25 countries in the agriculture sector, waste, and renewable energy. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. So the project overview, as I mentioned earlier, we have the donor is the International Climate Initiative from the Federal Ministry of the Environment, Nature Conservation, and Nuclear Safety, or ICI-BNU. The project owner is the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development in Lâm Đồng Province. The project has been implementing almost 3 years from 2018 to by the end of this year, 2021. So Lâm Đồng Province is in the Central Highland of Vietnam, and the project objective is try to reduce deforestation and forest degradation through the coffee agroforestry and the forest enhancement. Next slide, please. So you already see that Graham Smith and Kim Blake already say that the 4P approach, which is the public, private, producer, and partnership, also the FPIC recommendation. So luckily our project have taken this recommendation as a key principle for implementing our project. This is one of the RED+ project aim to achieve the goal to stabilize the land use, conserve the natural forest, promote agroforestry for the forest landscape restoration by working with the primary sector that drive deforestation or coffee in this case, and engaging companies to promote sustainable deforestation-free supply chain as one of the key national RED+ action program policy and measure. So you can see here as a public-private producer partnership, we have each activity for each sector. And the public sector, we try to enhance the capacity for the climate smart landscape planning, and also the working with the coffee company and other value chain company in this area to propose sustainability practice. We also working directly with the producer farmer to help them in the sustainable agriculture, agroforestry, and climate smart landscape solutions. With all of these public-private producer partnership, we have many knowledge product to share, and today very happy that we share this approach to very important regional event. Next slide, please. So in the FPIC process, this is very important to see the landscape and the project location. So our project is located in one of the most exciting places in Vietnam, with the size of double Singapore, very close to the Dallas city, one of the most tourist place in Vietnam. And you can see in my background, it is a forest in the area that we took. This play will be held the Miss Earth Vietnam 2021 for its famous landscape in the National Bi Đúc Nước Ba National Park, and also located in the Lang Biang Biosphere Reserve. I believe many of you in the region already conduct a study tour to our landscape, where it's famous for the payment for forest environmental service. So it's important to know that this district is covered by 85% of forest, and the rest is agriculture and settlement area, about 50%, and mostly ethnic minorities, the Kaha people, and working on coffee. Next slide, please. So we have conducted historical analysis of forest cover change, and you can see that we have been identified where is the hotspot area. That's why we conduct intervention in the 10 village, in the 4 commune, along the road connected Dallas city and the beach in Nha Trang. So we have been able to work with the public stakeholder. The government here is the Lạc Dương District People Committee, the Forest Owner National Park, the Forest Management Board, the coffee ranging from specialty small coffee company, medium-sized coffee company, and the large company. In 2019, with this partnership have been signed one of the most unique memorandum of understanding. You see, this is district reforestation-free sustainable landscape, and this is very good that these stakeholders come together to keep the forest cover of 85%, also deliver the basic income of the local people. One of the exciting results is today the forest cover has increased to 86.3%. Next slide, please. As Kim Lai already mentioned about the EPIC, and in here is the similar process that we see that EPIC is a practical means toward the conflict resolution. The Kaha people customarily use the land in the state forest area, and the EPIC is trying to achieve the effective forest conservation and landscape restoration. It's also one of the needs when we implementing REDD+ project at the social safeguard, comply with the United States Nation Framework Convention on Climate Change, or the Cancun Safeguard, the National Safeguard Framework, and also respond to the requirement of donor with the International Finance Performance Standard. It's then noticed here the Kaha people is one of the oldest ethnic group in the southern Central Highland. They have inhabited this region for 100 years traditionally, maintaining the lifestyle based on shifting cultivations. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, that the EPIC process is not something new. In Vietnam or in Lâm Đồng province, we have been pilot this EPIC since 11 years ago with the UN REDD program. And since then, we implementing a lot to develop the national guideline on the application of EPIC, and also reflect the lesson learned over the past 11 years and adopted it into our project implementation activity. It is good to mention again the EPIC is not a single activity, but it is continuously applied through the project implementation. And we're very happy that our project staff is in the field every week to deliver result and also meet with the local community, local official to deliver the project implementations. Next slide, please. So it is a similar project in the circle that you can see in the project design. We also conduct the environmental and social safeguard screening, and as a requirement of the IFC standard, performance standard. And during the early implementation project, we also conducting stakeholder consultation for the driver of deforestation, the value chain and livelihood assessment. Also conducting the environmental social assessment to have this plan in place. It's quite synchronized with the EPIC process that Kim Lai mentioned. And we're very happy to see why we conduct the initial EPIC process. We have the three group of consultants working together with the local official and local community to conduct a farm mapping process using the drone technology to have this village mapping process, and for the villager to see where is their village. This is also the participatory village land use planning process to develop a community conservation agreement. And you can see here some of the activity we conduct with the forest ranger for the drone training and actual field implementation. The local people here, when they sign the conservation agreement and how they voting for the EPIC process on the land use. So far, after this initial EPIC, we still working together with this community and official and the company on the ongoing EPIC. And so far, we are also strengthening the collaborative forest management and the grievance redress mechanism in place. Next slide, please. So during this participatory land use planning process, we employ training to this community, district people committee official, and training to the village head, the influential people in the 10 village to help them understanding of the many critical concepts like EPIC and what is the objective of the project and what's going on when they conduct the real village meeting. So this is the quote from Mr. Đừng Cơ Hoa, Miss Đừng Cơ Hoa from Tupar village, Dachai Commune. I would like to say her impression. So at the start of the project, we were informed about all the activity. So we know we cannot continue to cut down the forest, but sometimes there are few options for young family. We agree that develop a land use plan, protect and restore forest in return for supporting the project to improve livelihood. During the first consultation on the village land use planning, we propose to plant many variety as an home garden. In the second consultation, after being provided sufficient information related to the value chain, the market increase and diversify income from reduced deforestation, we had consult, discuss, and make decision at the coffee variety is the main crop, intercropping persimmon and macadamia on the village land use planning. Next slide, please. So in this process, we
Nam, very sorry to interrupt you. We'll have to ask you to conclude shortly, if that's okay.
Yeah, almost last slide. So we're able to have the 10 village broad community support and platform for improved landscape governance based on the consultation with community. And also improve the awareness and understanding, also increase motivation to participate. Next slide, please. So the advantage of this process, we can see this is relatively low cost and can be applied to the company or the public sector to building trust and get the people on their side. It's very important. And second thing is the trauma mapping and participatory verification approach with particular successful and demonstrate potential very rapid and competitively low cost forest land allocations. In the final slide, thank you so much for having me here on this important event. And we don't have the take-away message. We have a take-home message for you to all participants. So please drink only deforestation-free coffee every morning. So this makes the farmer happy and the forest happy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Namfam, for explaining about your project and the results from applying the FPIC principles on the ground. Also, a great background picture, and thanks for that little tip on the coffee. Now, rounding out this plenary session is Francois Guégon, who is going to be explaining the approach of Burapa Agroforestry, which is a private company, to FPIC and land acquisition processes in the Lao PDR. Francois?
Many thanks for the introduction and good morning, everyone. Thanks for the invitation to talk in this important forum. It is great to see familiar names and familiar faces. So again, good morning, everyone. Is that normal that I can't see a presentation?
Francois, are you showing? Oops,
I thought the presentation would be shown. Okay, that looks like it's coming. All right. So my name is Francois Guégan. I am the land manager at Burapa Agroforestry. I've been in this position since quite recently, October 2020, but I've been living in Laos for the last 14 years. Burapa Agroforestry is a Lao-Swedish company based in Vientiane. Our headquarters are in Vientiane capital. The company has been operational in Laos since 1989, so quite a few years already. And we're currently seeking to increase our eucalyptus plantation to feed into a plywood mill that's just finished construction in Hinh district north of Vientiane capital city, and eventually to feed a pulp mill. So my job as land manager with to acquire land and also to maintain current land holdings. Today I would like to present how we implement FPIC in our land acquisition process. And for this, I will use the example of our ongoing community consultations in villages around Puyuoi production forest area, north of Vientiane. I will first talk about a little bit of background to give context about the project, and then I will go into the process in more details. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, excellent. Thank you. So a bit of background on the ongoing consultations. As I was saying earlier, we are currently seeking, previous slide. We are currently seeking up to 60,000 hectares of land to expand our eucalyptus plantations. And on the other hand, the government of Laos is seeking to restore degraded forest land in these production forest areas. So our project supports the government of Laos' objective to restore this degraded forest land through plantation forestry. A bit of background on land tenure in the PFA, production forest areas. These are government lands, so private land ownership is not allowed. However, specifically with Puyoi production forest areas, you can see on the map here to the left, where the red is the boundaries of Puyoi PFA and the yellow dots are the villages, except for one, all of them are situated outside the production forest areas. So if you look at the map, the black dotted lines are the village boundaries, and all of them have access both within the PFA, but also outside. And as a consequence, they all have access to land ownership outside of the PFA land. In terms of land use, the current patterns are mostly rotational rice and cash crops on the hills. There is some level of permanent agriculture, such as rice paddy in the lowlands, and also agroforestry on the hills. Interestingly, most of the PFA land users are not from the actual villages. They can be from neighboring villages, but sometimes coming from quite distant villages, sometimes from a different district or even different province. Next slide, please. Now looking at our land acquisition process. The whole land acquisition process is quite complex, but a key element into this is our assessment of the land cover and the land use. For this, we have a dedicated team of skilled staff, including foresters, surveyors, ecologists, as well as community engagement specialists. They start a land cover assessment using imagery and drone, satellite imagery and drone imagery. And in short, only degraded and barren land. We do not take forested areas. There is no deforestation involved in the project. We do not take areas of high conservation value, no steep areas above 35 degrees slope. And we also set up buffers around waterways from 5 to 50 meters, depending on the size of the stream or the river. We are in this compliant with FSC standards. We are FSC certified and also follow the IFC's performance standards. There is more to this, but this is a summary of our land cover assessment. And we also do, in the process of our land acquisition, a land use assessment. So how is the land used? And in short, only and upland fields are selected. We do not take away land that has been used for permanent agriculture. For example, here on this map, you can see in yellow, this is land that has been identified as rice paddy, so this is not taken. Also areas where there are already trees on the land, where villagers may have planted, for example, rubber trees. That is also not taken. Also any other area that may be culturally significant for local communities are not taken. So on this map here, you can see in green, natural forest is left aside, red area, which is steep slopes, and as well, of course, the river buffers and the rice paddy area. Next slide, please. So while this is happening, and at the same time, we do seek community consent. And why do we do that? The bottom line is that for our investment to be safe, we do need strong community support. There is no point going into an area where local people do not support you. It wouldn't make sense. There would be too much risk. So this is our bottom line. We conduct extensive consultation that take time, and that ensures that we can understand each community's complex context. Again, we need the support, and to get the support, we first need consent. Support starts with consent. To get there, extensive consultations. Essential in these consultations is time. Our process is a multi-step process that allows time. It can be quite lengthy, depending on the size of the village, on the actual context of how much land needs to be surveyed. It can take a month, 2 months, 3 months. But it is important that we allow time between the moment where we propose a project and the moment where we ask for consent. Our process allows for multiple visits and opportunities for honest and transparent feedback and eventually consent. At the end of the survey, the decision is a village decision. It's a community-wide approval. But we go further. Just as every village is different based on socioeconomics or groups, we also believe that each household is different. So we conduct a survey of each household using fair land, which provides us with household level data. This is also a two-step process through which each PFA land user household is asked questions about the land that they're using, how they've been using it, when and when they got it from, how they've been using it since then. And we ask at the end of the first step, the first interview, whether they agree with the project. And no matter what the answer is, there is a second step to the survey at the end of the survey process, during which it is asked whether they give their consent to the project. And there is always an option for people to say no, for these land users to say no to the project. And that's absolutely okay. And we believe that our model is good enough that by implementing our project in neighboring areas, that these land users will agree, or will convince them that the project is good, and they will hence join us later on. By demonstrating how we work, we believe that people will want to join. Excuse me. These extensive consultations allow us to disseminate information and provide full disclosure of our project, whether it's the company policies, the benefit sharing mechanism, very importantly, employment and income opportunities that come with working with the project. This is really important because not all companies function like this. Our model is based on working with the communities who use the land. So we enter into labor contracts that are long-term. It's not just about daily labor payments. It really is about having a long-term relationship with these communities, working together, and communities are partners. So in short, seeking consent through these extensive consultations allow us to get good data. Good data allows us to make appropriate decisions, and we believe this is conducive to trust. Eventually, this will lead to good community support and create our social license to operate. This will make our investment safe. So this is why we use FPIC. It really is part of our model, part of our DNA. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Francois, for your presentation and your emphasis on community support and consent when you're looking at investments, when your company is looking at investments. Let's now move on to the panel commentary and Q&A. Mariana Bicchieri from the FAO will be moderating the discussion. And Mariana will be joined by Mr. Uy Kamal from Cambodia's Department of Environmental Knowledge and Information, who is also a RED Plus Deputy Secretary, Mr. Kitlakse Kokmila, the Deputy Director General of the Department of Land under Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment in the Lao PDR, and Mr. Wen Hu Tsung from FAO in Vietnam.
Okay, thank you so much, Tin, and good morning, everyone. My name is Mariana Bicchieri, and I'm the Land Tenure Officer working for FAO in the Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, based in Bangkok. I'm delighted to be here with you today. Thank you so much. And first of all, let me thank the speakers for the very rich and informative presentations. It was extremely interesting to hear the trends on land issues over decades and noting that responsible investment can bring considerable benefits for all involved, including local communities with customary tenure systems. There are so many negative investments and land grabbing that it's easy to forget that responsible investment are not necessarily something bad to be resisted. And FPIC, free, prior, and informed consent, is crucial to ensure that land investments are responsible. We got very interesting perspectives from NGOs and a private sector company. As Kin Lai noted, violations of land-related human rights are not just something that it's negative and harmful for communities, but it's always also bad business. We learned from his presentation that this is not the way to go, of course. And with Nampan, we could hear tangible benefits from communities from FPIC. FPIC, it's not only a process to get consent, but in the examples that he shared, communities had access to innovation, to technology, they got into conservation agreements. So all those are very positive futures that we can achieve through an FPIC process. And it was also very interesting to hear from Francois, practical example of a very positive engagement with rural communities and very responsible practices that have been implemented by Burapa. So before opening the floor for Q&A, we'll have the privilege to have a brief panel discussion and hear the insights of three distinguished speakers. Mr. Yu Kamal, who is the Deputy Director General of the General Directorate of Environmental Knowledge and Information under the Ministry of Environment in Cambodia. Mr. Ki Telachai Kokmila, who is the Deputy Director General of the Department of Land under the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment in Lao PDR, and Mr. Nguyen Dzu, who is the National Coordinator of the FAO Project Sustainable Forest Trade in Vietnam. So we would like to hear your insights about the presentations. We would also want to hear your views about FPIC and challenges and opportunities in relation to FPIC based in experiences from your countries. You will have 5 minutes each, so please be mindful about the time limit because after 5 minutes, our IT team will mute you. So without further ado, let me invite Mr. Yu Kamal to start his intervention. Mr. Yu Kamal, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Very good morning, Mariana. Dear all participants in this forum. It is a great pleasure for me to be on behalf of my General Director and the Chair of the National Red Cross Cambodia. I have opportunity to attend in this important regional workshop. Before I start, I would like to highlight that Cambodia, from now, we have completed our phase 1 of Red Plus program under the technical support of UNDP and the FAO Cambodia through the Forest Carbon Partnership Program. In this project, we have achieved key element of the Warsaw Framework on Red Plus, like National Red Plus Strategy, National Forest Monitoring System, reference emission level, and of course, the important thing is safeguard information system. Now Cambodia just complete its phase 1, the readiness, and moving to the phase 2 implementation of the RED+. In the point, I would like to highlight that Cambodia developed its own national safeguard information system by following the 7 principal Cancun principle on RED+. And I also want to reflect that particularly safeguard C, safeguard D, and safeguard E of the Cancun Agreement would fit or support to the EPIC, that the important subject that we are discussing for within this 2-day workshop. In short, from my view, I see EPIC is one tool that can help to achieve the national safeguard information system of the country, RED+. However, EPIC seems like in depth help the small scale producer, particularly in agriculture sector, to respect, to consider, to focus more environmental quality enhancement and ensure safeguard, social safeguard in the small scale agro system. And like basic fundamental support to achieve, help to achieve national safeguard system. Thank you very much. I beg to your Marina. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And so thank you so much, Mr. Wilkamal. And let me now invite Mr. Keith Lachai Kokmila to start his intervention. Mr. Kokmila, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much to give me an opportunity to share the idea in this meeting. Again, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Keith Lachai Kokmila, Deputy Director General, Department of Lands, working under the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment in Laos. Okay, in terms of the EPIC, the principle, in my idea, if I compare to my work, I mean, in the systematic land legislation work, it is the same as the public awareness work. It means before we do some activity in the target, we implement some project, we have to inform or we have to provide information before implementation and some things. Okay, let I talk about my experience on the systematic land legislation in Laos. Before we start working in the Sham village, the first thing we have to do, we should open the meetings in the village, and the meetings, we invite on of the household, that means on of the people who live in village to join the meeting together. In the meetings, it's not only the head of the household, but also men and women together. In the meetings, we will provide the objective, what we want to do in the village clearly. And we will explain on of the procedures of our implementation to the people. And also in the same time, we also do discussion together with people. And if they have question or they don't understand what we explain to them, then they can ask our team, then our team can provide information to them step by step. And after that, they will understand what they will support us or what they will prepare for themselves to join our work. So that case, we call maybe consultation meetings in the village level. But before we go to the field to do the practical work, we still have the special meetings for the women as well. We open the meetings and with the women in the village. We will explain about their right, about their duties to join us, to join our works, and also the basics of the laws and some rules about the implementation of land registration. So the women in the village, they will understand the basic of the law and also the rules, especially their right. They will know how to protect their right. And also they will know how to prepare some information to provide to our teams. For example, the information about the history of the land, or land file documents, something like that. And also the history of the land use file. For example, if they have some documents to show us that they should prepare, for example, tax document or some document they receive from local authorities, something like that. And not only open the meeting with the women, we also the open meeting with the head of the village, because the head of the village will be the key person. Will work closely with our team in the field. So the head of the village will support us to work with the villager closely. They will explain what the activity they will do with the villagers, something like that. So in this case, I can say that it is the same with the FPIC principle that we implement in our procedures or in our implementation of our work. So about the challenging of the FPIC or public awareness in our system, I think in Laos, especially in the rural areas of Laos, the villager or the people, they don't pay more attention to join our activity or to join our work. So it is very serious for us. So we have to do many times about the public awareness. So we go to the unit of the household, then we explain again about their right, about their duty, and we push them to support us to work in the fields. So this is my opinion to share with you about the FPIC principle. So this is some information that I share in this meeting. Thank you. Over.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kokmila. We got two very interesting interventions from government, in Cambodia and Laos. Thank you so much. And now we are going to hear the inputs from Mr. Nguyen Dung from FAO in Vietnam. So Mr. Dung, the floor is yours.
My name is Nguyen Hữu Dung. I'm working with the Sustainable Forest Trade local Mekong project under UN RED program. Before that, I used to work with the UN RED program, Vietnam Phase 2, and an FCBF project for a short time. And before the project, I used to work with the government, with the Forest Protection Department, which is the leading agency in forest management and protection in Vietnam. I fully agree with Mr. Lai Kim, Mr. Nam, and Mr. François on the importance of FPIC in providing safeguards to local community to protect their rights, and also that this FPIC is a very good instruments for projects, investors to avoid any conflicts which come up when the projects and the investment go to the state of implementation, and conflicts sometimes is very costly and sometimes very painful for investors and projects if the concerns of local community are not properly addressed. In Vietnam, FPIC is aligned with the policy and legislative framework. We have a policy, we call it grassroots democracy, which rely on the principles of people should know, should discuss, should implement it, supervise, and benefit from any project or from any policies and legislation. And this policy framework facilitate FPIC introduction into Vietnam. My experience with FPIC is primarily when I participated in the implementation of UN RED program, which started to work in Vietnam in 2010, also almost 10 years ago. There is a lot of experience we can get from the process, and I would like to share with you some of the experience. The first one is FPIC is best done by the local community, or at least and very active engagement of local communities is very important, and how to include all members to the process is crucial, especially vulnerable groups such as women and poor households. The capacity of the local communities is very important to make FPIC a success. And as a result, support to strengthen their capacity is required. And there is an important role of local authorities, such as the commune people's committee, village leaders, and mass organization, such as women union, farmer union, and other organizations. We our experience, that information provided at FPIC should be very concise, easy to understand, and if possible, in ethnic minorities languages. It should be relevant to the local context and circumstances, and information should avoid have very high expectation. That is the experience we gain from EPIC process in Vietnam. Achievement we have is the EPIC contribute to the development of RED Plus strategy and action plans at the national, provincial, and site level. We have developed a lot of science-based RED action plan, and we have implemented the EPICs very frequently. The capacity to do EPIC has been strengthened in Vietnam. As Mr. Nam is referred to you, Lâm Đồng province is not, EPIC is not new to Lâm Đồng province where CAFE and RED Plus is implemented. And public awareness about EPIC is getting much better and better. Some challenges we observe is EPIC can be a very lengthy and costly process if it is not properly planned and implemented.
Mr. Zong, sorry for interrupting you. Please, you have 1 minute to wrap up.
Okay, very short, 3 lines. Limited participation of some key stakeholders, such as women and poor households, could be a challenge. And capacity of communities and local authorities and other stakeholders also plays a role. So that is my intervention. Thank you. Back to you.
Okay, thank you so much for another very interesting intervention. Thank you for all panelists once again. Something that came up strong in your talks is the importance of foster gender equality. It's indeed a very interesting point, and it's good to see experience from the country duly considering this very important issue. So now we are going to open for Q&A. 1 second. Let me just take the questions. We got a lot of very interesting questions for all the speakers. Thank you so much. And let me start with a question to Graham Dixie from Eva Prediger from GIZ Land Program in Laos. Grant, could you elaborate a bit further on the question how we can involve the private sector in RAI initiatives? What are the practical incentives and approach to get also little companies on board? I'd like to ask all the speakers to be concise while replying to the question so we can have many questions. So Graham, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I'll keep it short, but thanks for the question. It's a great one. So what we are doing at the moment is rolling out a program which will be across the ASEAN region. Part of that is that with the private sector, what they want to know is the practical side. They don't want to make expensive mistakes, so they want to learn from one another. So we're doing case studies of 15 projects, and coupled with earlier studies, builds up a practical way. How do you handle these particular issues? The second thing is that to make it something which is in their best interest, and I've been fascinated to hear actually the consensus that's come through with the different speakers about actually getting the local community on board is really important. And it makes the business easier, it makes the relationships easier, and so on. So we need to be able to encourage them to take up these practices because they're for their own good. And the third piece is many of the good companies are already doing a number of these standards, and they normally say to us, we don't need another one. So the approach has been that actually, if you look at responsible investing, there's only so many responsible things you can do. And many of them will be now applying some of those already. So the approach that we've taken is you don't have to restart. You just have to add the ones that you aren't doing so that you've now got the coverage of the ASEAN RAI as well as the existing standard that you've operated on. So let's keep it easy for them and let's emphasize the fact that this is in their best advantage. Over.
Okay, thank you so much, Graham. And our next question is from, it's for Kim Lai, from Kate Rickersey from Land Equity International. So Kim, in your experience, what has been your entry point to start discussing with investors? Is it on the ground through management, corporate policy lead, or others? I assume there are many entry points. What has worked for you as FPIC practitioner? Kim, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the question. We got to adopt, based on Oxfam experience, we adopted different approaches. One of the approach is to have the company to understand the importance of having social license to operate, and that is through FPIC. And some of the company make a commitment to go to apply international standards, some of the standards related to social environmental safeguards. So that is a positive one. But even companies say so, it doesn't mean that the company would apply it. The company may have challenges in how to apply it effectively with the communities. For Oxfam, we conducted a so-called community consent index. It's a report that to assess policy commitments of company to apply FPIC, the process of which allow us to interact with the company, allow us to understand the issue, the gap, the interest of the company. And so as we publish which companies say yes to FPIC, which companies say no, and so on, so on. And then for the implementations, we prepare communities to be able to negotiate with the company, because the important aspects of FPIC is the consent, and the consent is through negotiation. So communities are empowered to understand the approaches, the processes, and they organize themselves to have a negotiation with the companies. In some cases, communities are under pressure. Companies want to go to a fast approach to get community consent or agreement. And in some cases, community receive a kind of intimidations, accusation, and so on. We also facilitated the environment whereby such kinds of conditions should not happen to the community, allow sufficient time to the community to internally discuss, so as they can prepare themselves whether they say yes or no to the company. There are examples whereby company, put pressure. I don't want to name any company, but community say no, and that is the moment where tension happen, and government agency want to see exploration activity, mining exploration activity took place. They also want to intervene. We come in, say no, let give community more time to make decision whether they want to accept company to do explorations or not in the land area or nearby the land area. So as a result, when community have more time, they went through the process, and that is a time whereby trust and relationship between companies and community improve, and that's the time where you can go to FPIC process, negotiation process. So it depends on company, how company like to invest in creating a trust relationship with communities as an initial part of implementing EPIC process. So there are many fronts. At the regional level, we develop partnership with the indigenous people-based organizations and network to develop tools. As you see in my presentations, Oxfam also developed some tools. The tool can be used by NGOs, by local community representatives. We train some NGO how to know the process and the steps. So from NGO side, if community acquire technical services, NGO also prepare to offer such support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Kim Lai. And our next question is for Nampan from Albert Salamanca. Do we have examples of communities that did not provide consent to a proposal by a company due to social and environmental concerns? Is FPIC just a regulatory requirement or something that needs to be addressed because the communities have a right to have a say on development in their territories? Nampam, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the exciting question. It's a great one. I think this question cannot be answered by Google. It is luckily throughout the process, there's no objection from the local people and the community to the company. But I can see the process in the how to make these stakeholders together and understanding each other is quite important throughout the EPIC process, and to see selection and also convincing this company to do the best practice and also responsible business in the region is quite important, and how to match making them with the local community and bring them together, have understanding process, building trust, and understand what is happening when they in the value chain or the partnership together. Of course, with backed by the government or the district people committee in this case. Yeah. And also, as I mentioned in my presentation, this is not one shot. It's a ongoing process when you have to resolve many like an issue along the process. It's like over the past 2 years, we have gone through a lot of great experience, and sometimes the managing expectation from the local people and also the company. The company wants very good coffee, red dry, and sustainable practice. And the farmer is one to have a higher price and also try to share as much as possible. And sometimes we have to managing expectation between the two stakeholders. And one of the questions in the chat box is saying that what is the role of the NGO here? I think it's because the NGO come in and come out, so it's like a broker and try to make these stakeholders stick together. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Nampan. And our next question is for Francois from Marita Cisneros. What happens if the community says no? Do you walk away or go back to government and apply for a new concession? Should FPIC be a precondition of granting land concession? Francois, the floor is yours.
For a very good question. We don't walk away if there is if no consent is provided. We try to continue the consultation and the discussion with the local community, trying to understand more why the community is not agreeing. going back to my presentation, we might do extra household consultations and maybe hold another community meeting. But at the end of the day, if they, the village does not agree, then yeah, we do walk away for a bit anyway. We hope, as I was saying in my presentation, that if we implement our model in neighboring villages, we hope this can be an opportunity for that village, which has says no, to have a look at, ask villagers who are working with the project and see what we actually do, whether we say that we do, whether we pay on time, how much money they can get a day, what can they do with the land while we have a concession on it, because it really is about sharing the use of the land. So this is our approach as a community. Says no, we don't walk away, we don't give up, but we don't force any decision, of course, on the community. It's been rewarding using this approach because our model does create benefit for local people. So most when people have access to it, can see it work, they then join the project. Second question was on, should FPIC be a precondition to concession agreements? This is more a personal question rather than a question for the company to apply to. But I would say that yes, this would be very good. It is essential to have community approval. As I was saying in my presentation, what's the point of moving into an area if the community don't support you as a company making an investment? So it would help if having community consent was made into the formal process of getting a concession. Over. I hope I answered the questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Francois. Let me also thank all the participants. We have a vast amount of questions, very interesting questions. Unfortunately, due to time constraints, we are not going to be able to share it with all the speakers, but we'll make sure that they get the questions and they can interact with you throughout the forum and even afterwards. So let me wrap up the session. I think it was a really interesting session with interesting perspectives from different sectors. It gives us a lot of food for thought. The importance of carrying out FPIC in a responsible manner. It was mentioned in one of the presentations that frequently we read so many cases of FPIC process in which consent is sort of forced or manipulated. As we learned today, this is not only a violation of land-related human rights, as I mentioned earlier, but also this is bad business. And FPIC, well implemented, can lead to tangible positive benefits to communities. So I hope that through this session and through the learning that we are generating today and throughout the forum, we can help inspire FPIC that is responsible, that is true, that is useful throughout investments in our region. So once again, thank you so much to everybody, and let me give the floor back to Win. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mariana, and of course to all the speakers. Like Mariana said, we have had a great number of questions, and I think MRLG people are working to make sure that some of the questions that weren't picked up would be answered. Now, those of you who attended the forum yesterday will know what's coming up. We're going to have a short break followed by breakout group discussions, which should start at around 11 o'clock. There might be a little bit delay because we're running a little bit over time. Now, please remember that you will have to log into these breakout sessions using different Zoom links. You can find these links on the Wova app or on the event webpage on the Land Portal website. Now, there are 8 breakout sessions. And again, some of the sessions are in local language, but there is English interpretation for all sessions. Now, the breakout sessions will then last for about 45 minutes, after which you'll have another short break before rejoining the plenary for key takeaways at 12 o'clock noon. Now, one last point before you go, we are conducting a poll again today, but this time on responsible agricultural investment. The poll is open all day, and we've just put the link to the poll in the chat box. See you back here for the plenary at 12. Thank you. Apologies for the delay in starting the session. We just wanted to make sure that we've got all the translators set up properly so everybody could follow the takeaway session, even if your first language is in English. So we've got Femi Pinto from the Non-Timber Forest Products Exchange Program, who many of you might remember from her speech yesterday, will be giving us what are the key takeaways and plans for future actions on FPIC. Femi?
Thank you, Tin. I think they will show my slides. And you can just make it in presentation mode, I guess. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you can, next slide. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to be here again to speak with you all and provide the key takeaways from this morning until just now that we finished the breakout sessions. And it's quite challenging to try and incorporate everything in such a short time. So I hope that I do justice, and apologies if some of the points have not been captured, but I am trusting that this would cover most of it. So this morning, we learned basically the whole framework about free, prior, and informed consent. It is an international standard protected by international human rights law in terms of all people's right to self-determination and participation in decision-making, particularly recognizing that which will affect people's well-being. It is a right to process, and as Oxfam had also provided us with the framework and the definitions and the context for free, what is prior, what is informed, and what is consent. Key points around that would be that the process is free from manipulation or coercion. There's a process that prior to the consultation and the engagement with communities, a prior process that would be within the community and also following their traditional governance process. Informed being that it is facilitative and there's a sharing of objectives that are accurate and easily understandable. And finally, it allows for the right to say no, to provide the yes or no to a particular project. Foremost, another context or definition about FPIC is that foremost, it's a safeguard which has its origins according to the universal rights of indigenous peoples. And in recent years, it has become part of the social safeguards framework in climate change related agreements. In many cases, it's already captured in national policy and regulatory frameworks. However, it still remains to be limited. Next slide, please. So where have we gained these takeaways? I think I may not have exhausted everyone or mentioned everyone here, but we find the logos of all the organizations, including also companies that have presented earlier. And thank you for giving us all these examples of FPIC in practice. And we heard from this morning from Oxfam in developing practical approaches to FPIC in the Mekong countries, the public-private partnership on REDD+ in the coffee sector in Vietnam with Cafe Red, and the Burapa agroforestry case. And then there's several from the breakouts, examples and inputs from CSO presentations in context of conservation, protected management, and others. One of the major thing, kind of the overarching message from this morning was that FPIC is possible to gain. It is not a zero-sum game. that it's something that we cannot avoid. But more so from Kim Lai, it is important, particularly in the Mekong region, where there are many, there's a significant proportion of indigenous and ethnic populations in the region, from which, yeah, the origins of FPIC is really in terms of responding and respecting their rights. Next slide, please. So okay, so I have 5 key takeaways, and the first one is that FPIC could easily be seen as a challenging process, that it's costly and could be a bed of conflict and distrust. There's lack of clarity in laws and institutions to enforce FPIC, and this lack of clarity may contribute to this conflict and distrust. But there are also instances where many countries have national laws meant to ensure just processes of land transfer consistent with the requirement to obtain FPIC. But few have yet adopted national laws that explicitly mention FPIC as an obligation. But FPIC requires that communities can meaningfully participate in decision-making process and that their concerns, priorities, and preferences are accommodated in project designs, indicators, and outcomes. This may require more time at the start of a project, but we heard also from the speakers earlier that ultimately in the end, if this is taken up, it could lead to avoidance of disputes over land and resources claims later on. And there was also an argument that cost of conflict could in fact be much more costly for companies, and therefore it's better to be addressing this, and at the end of the day, it's also a good return on investment. Next takeaway is that as a process, consultations must be done in good faith and should be genuine among government, private sector, and communities. Some examples are already demonstrating this, and we can build from this. In the example of a public-private partnership on REDD+ in the coffee sector in Vietnam, promoting deforestation-free coffee and sustainable coffee agroforestry models, we learned that by using community engagement and making that an ongoing process is quite important and is required. In fact, we even heard one of the companies mentioned that it's already ingrained in their DNA to actually be doing this. This can provide opportunities to build more experience on the practical application of FPIC. We also heard Graham also mentioned about profitability is equated to responsibility. Oxfam also showing their community engagement index, where there are already some companies exactly in the Mekong region that's already saying yes to FPIC, and so hopefully that this would this would continue. Okay. The third takeaway would be that meaningful engagement in various forms, such as structured and multiple dialogues at different levels, accessible and appropriate communication would constitute good practice. Apologies that the slide got cut, but a tangible result of good FPIC practices can be the building of community engagement and trust among stakeholders, contributing to inclusive and gender-sensitive participation of communities in decision-making processes that affect them, and thereby the long-term sustainability of the investment or project. As mentioned earlier, meaningful engagement could also be around putting it in the project cycle of the companies and making it an ongoing process, rather than it just being kind of a tick in the box and just at the onset or outset of a project, and not really continually consulting and engaging with the communities. There is also an important message from the breakout group that I joined about meaningful engagement, that it is not only about being legalistic and legalistic in the interpretation of the guidelines or what FPIC is all about, but it should really be an embedded understanding of the spirit of FPIC. And so that's one of the important points that we can take in terms of what is really meaningful and genuine FPIC. Part of I would also add to that in terms of the meaningful engagement and also the forms and types of actions that are included in FPIC. It's not only about multiple dialogues at different levels, having also locally consultation materials in local language, but it also should include treatment of the violations of the right of communities, and where the exercise of FPIC might not be truly meaningful and genuine, and that there should also be proper grievance mechanisms included in that engagement, and also the disclosure processes as part of good practice. The next key takeaway is that it is important to understand the enabling policy and business environment to widen application and practice of FPIC. We must move beyond concept, but as a widely held and applied process from a rights-based perspective. We've also heard in the some of the breakout sessions that there are already opportunities and entry points existing nationally and in ASEAN. And even the MRLG program itself could already be a facilitative program for widening and broadening the practice of FPIC. The adoption of FPIC, as we know and as we heard, is already promoted in international instruments. So that can also be part of that enabling policy and business environment. How do we intersect the new the guidelines for responsible investments in agriculture? How do we also integrate the other frameworks like the UN SDGs, UNDRIP again, and also the CBD and climate change frameworks? The next key takeaway, another part of that policy environment, and this was mentioned in the breakout, that there are potential entry points within ASEAN to advocate for FPIC, and there are particular working groups that already exist that can be tapped. It's also good, there's a quote here that I got that starting off at the ASEAN level would be quite good to break the ice, and from where we can expand the understanding of the spirit of FPIC, that beyond just the indigenous peoples, that it's for the good of all society. And having this due process could also be encouraged nationally, and that there could be a shared roadmap that could be developed at the regional level. Few working groups that exist already that can be good entry points would be the ASEAN Working Group on Social Forestry, the ASEAN Working Group on Agricultural Cooperatives, and also the ASEAN Commission on Human Rights. The last key takeaway is that CSO, indigenous peoples and local communities, ethnic and local communities, still need to increase their capacity and knowledge in FPIC to better and strategically advocate and lobby for its full and effective implementation. They need a platform and safe space to raise and discuss experience and importance of FPIC and connect with other stakeholders such as the government and private sector to communicate the need for FPIC. One of the other aspects to be included within that whole process of capacity building and knowledge building is possibly also the development of community protocols, conduct assessments on quality FPIC and make this information public. And essentially what we need to see is really having everyone in the process that's involved have to be at the equal level of capacity and knowledge and understanding about the process. And more so also with the indigenous people, ethnic and local communities, for them to also be able to build their ownership of the process and internalize their stake in it. Finally, the use of platforms and engagements, as mentioned earlier, in terms of entry points, could still be used in the next couple of years. I'll leave you with a slide that Oxfam had shared with us, which gives also some very basic key points. The top line is basically one of the deeper spirit of FPIC is that the community has a right to decide. And communities have rights, but FPIC involves everyone. So that's the key takeaway, and then a last request. Next slide. We are all invited to join, to participate in a consultation by going into menti.com. It says here, we are in a unique position to have a gathering of more than 700 experts on land issues here in the Mekong. We cannot miss this chance to get a snapshot of your opinions on some of the issues presented here. There will be 2 polls during the forum. One took place already yesterday, and the other one is scheduled for today. So for today, we have here the code 74143422. Please join and answer the question, what are your priorities to ensure responsible agriculture investments in the region? Thank you very much. Hope that is okay, and have a good lunch.
Thank you so much, Femi, for that insightful roundup of all the discussions and presentations on FPIC this morning. I'm sure it must have been not easy to try and put them all into a short presentation. Now we're going to have a lunch break until 2 p.m. and then we will start session 4, the final session, where we'll be looking at the challenges that investors face in applying the principles of responsible agriculture investment in the Mekong region and how they can be better supported. Now, please remember that you will have to log into a new Zoom room for session 4. You can find the link on the Huova app or in the agenda. Enjoy your lunch and see you back at 2 p.m. Thank you.